About 20 years ago, an Orthodox minister, cardinal leader of the Orthodox tradition, felt that in this long season that we call the ordinary time of our church calendar, that we should pay special attention to the earth and the reality that we are called to be the caretakers, the stewards of this gift that we've been given. Since that time, it has grown and grown, and now there's a season of creation which spans this whole month long. And so today we begin this new journey together. This weekend is Labor Day. How many people are excited to have an extra day off? How many of you are kind of sad, you could go to work more a little bit? Some of you are retired, every day is Labor Day, right? Well, as a kid, I grew up on the East Coast, and Labor Day was the saddest weekend of all the year long. Because Labor Day, not only did the pools close, but the day after Labor Day, Tuesday, meant that the new school year started. And we had to go back to structure and homework and tests and all the things that no child should ever be given in their life. And then as this season began, it would suddenly turn to fall, and the leaves would start changing colors. And we'd make big piles, and we'd jump into them. And then suddenly the dreadfulness of winter came, in which the cold air would bite you, and the days would become short with light and long with darkness. And we would wait for that glorious moment where the next season would appear. What was it called? Christmas. I mean, come on, you know that. And then we would wait for spring to come, and we would get to go outside again and enjoy the wonder, and then the next best weekend all year long, Memorial Day weekend. Why? I'm a heathen. Because the pools opened up and school was out for summer. And every year, without any work, this seasonal pattern repeated itself over and over and over again, until I became an adult. And suddenly, you all expect me to work all summer long. But the reality for us is that we live within a rhythm that's around us and within us. Some of those rhythms we create, but most of the rhythms of life, we are just a part of. And so this first Sunday of the season of creation, we want to pause to take a moment and notice the creation, and specifically our creation story of Genesis 1. A few months ago, there was a gathering of youth from the Western region called RYE, Western Regional Youth Event. At this event, one of our kids of the church, who's now an adult, Corey Tom, was commissioned to do a series of paintings on large boards in which over that time there were 4 panels that told the story of creation. Today we brought the first one in. Perhaps you noticed something different on the stage. What things do you see in this painting? Ocean, fish, boat, man, trees, clouds. Is it sunrise or sunset? It depends on if you're a morning person or not, right? Some of you are like, sunrise, what's that? I've never seen it. I come to 11 o'clock on purpose, right? 7 o'clock a.m., they're all like, oh, it's sunrise, clearly. But a part of this is what's in the middle, the Hokulea, a voyaging canoe that certainly, if anyone's been around this place for a while, knows about its history. Well, today, to do the sermon on this Laity Sunday, I invited 2 other individuals, Nathan Wong and our lovely poet, Marion Lyman Mercero. Nathan has voyaged on the Hokulea 5 times, and Marion Lyman Mercero was on the second voyage that capsized and then later went on a successful, as she referred to it as, voyage. And today they're going to come and share their experience of creation, Hokulea, and what that means in faith. And so if you all would come forward. Everybody welcome them. So after your experience on Hokulea, what was your impression of creation? Are you happy? No. After sailing on Hokulea, what was your impression of creation?
I was sick for 4 days. And once I got my sea legs, it became one of the most amazing and beautiful and glorious experiences of my life. And how many of you have ever been seasick? Yeah. So you all know that first you're afraid you're going to die, and then you're afraid you won't. And you just kind of want out of that misery. And so when I did finally come out of that misery, it was just, I was very Pollyanna on that canoe. And I was, you know, when I had the morning watch, it was, oh my gosh, look at that sunrise. And when I had the evening watch, look at those stars, look at that sun, the ocean, look at these, I mean, everything was just beautiful. And they're all grumbling, yeah, where were you the first 4 days? They really, literally rolled me over into one of the hulls where I hung out. So creation was probably the most glorious, and I'm a very much of a nature animal, and but seeing all that I could see for those days was amazing.
Well, to add to that, I think what impressed me in my first voyage and all the others is being out there on a canoe, sailing canoe that was made in essence by hand, put together by hand, and being out there and looking at creation is infinitely large, infinitely extensive, and comparing that to us sitting on a very wide ocean, feeling and looking infinitesimally small. And as I looked out at the heavens and the seas and the patterns, as Pastor David mentioned, and thinking about the rhythm of the seas, the rhythm of the seasons, you can't help but think that this creation has to have a creator. And there's a design here. Everything fits. And that leads you to understanding or feeling that there is a higher power that does all this. So that's a short way of saying it.
So in essence, what you're saying is that through the creation, you had the taste of the divine, that it was clear that something greater is at work because of what you see all around you. Richard Rohr says that the first Bible written was creation, that everything that we need to know of God is found in the midst of the created order, for it all points back to the Creator. In the midst of the Hokulea, you relied on creation not only to be overwhelmed by its beauty, but to be a partner. How did you partner with creation to voyage?
And proverb Olelo No'ea says, he wa'a he moku he wa'a. The canoe is an island, the island is a canoe. And to me, in that proverb, it just says, especially when you're on a canoe, of course it could be metaphorical about the earth, or it could be metaphorical about our island here, but we're all in this together, in this creation together, and we're surrounded by it, and it's what gives us a sense of there being something larger than us. I find with my agnostic husband and a lot of my students that would say, I don't believe in God, there's no evidence. I said, look at a flower. What do you mean there's no evidence? And I find God in nature. And did I answer the question?
Sure. Okay. It was beautiful what you were saying, so it's an answer, yes.
I guess also with nature, with the same thought about the canoe being an island. In a way, when we look at ancient voyaging, the canoe doesn't go somewhere. The islands that we're heading to comes to the canoe. And the canoe stays in one place. And you pull up the island or the place you're going to. So when you think about it, you're always home. And when I compare the vision of a voyage with, say, the European society, European perspective, which we've all been taught in, you have to overcome the ocean in order to get to some other place. You have to overcome it, you have to combat it, you have to conquer it. Well, in the Pacific perspective, we are home. You don't have to conquer the ocean. The ocean is always there, and we're always home. So the thought that the canoe itself is always home, and the ocean is bringing the island that we're going to us. So that's a very cooperative way of looking at it. Not only that, but of course using the stars and using the oceans and using everything that God has given us in nature to assist us in wayfinding. So fairly cooperative.
Yeah, yeah. And this passage of Genesis 1 is our scriptural account, one of them, of the rhythm of God's created order. And as Nate alluded to, most of us are trained in a Western mindset and way of thinking of the world and how it was created and what its purpose is. Often we see it as a commodity instead of a gift. And that often what our struggles are now is we've over-commoditized our land and the oceans and everything else. But in the story of this first chapter, there's this repeated rhythm of refrain of God creates, and at the end of the creation, God says, "It is good. It is good. It is good." Part of that Western thought that I was trained in was that darkness is evil and light is good. What do the scriptures actually say about darkness and light?
Well, again, looking at those very first verses, God. Well, I'll go back to the very beginning, because first the earth was void, and there was darkness, and there was the deep. So darkness and the waters were here first, and God brought light to what was already there, which was the darkness and the deep, and His Spirit passed over the waters. And he said, "Let there be light." And He said, "This is good." And then He said, when He wanted to separate day from night, He just basically said, light is day, darkness is night. He didn't say one was good and one was bad. So I've always thought that we've somehow gone astray in thinking that light is good, day is good, night is bad, dark is bad. No, they're all good. And I think it's important to think about that. Because darkness is very helpful for us, much as day is. Darkness is where we find our bearings. And so I always think about, hello darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk to you again. So I look at darkness as a time for, and on the canoe it's definitely valuable because that's where we really get our bearings. But darkness in life is also valuable in that it gives us time to stop, to think, to even dream, to have some insights, to get perspective, to just listen in a different way because we can't see anything. We can use our other senses. There's lots of things that darkness brings us. And so we need to look at it as good just as much as light.
Sorry, my kids got me sick. And I have a cough drop. It's getting worse.
So right now, as I speak, just to get us involved with the Hokulea, Hikianalia, her sister ship, is sailing to San Francisco. My brother's on board, and this is terrible. When I have my son or my brother on board is when I'm really paying attention to how the canoe is doing. And she is now heading east. But I just read one of the recent updates, you can go to hokulea.com.
Yes.
And it was saying that up there in the Pacific High, they were at about 42 degrees. Remember, we're at 21, so they've gone pretty far. And far north, cloudy, cloudy, cloudy. They're all in foul weather gear. They're wearing scarves, they're wearing beanies, it's very cold, and they can't get their bearings because of the cloudiness. They're completely dependent on the ocean swells and then hoping in the morning they'll see the sunrise in the east. And since they're heading east, they're hoping they'll see it straight. And they did make that sighting the other day, and so they know they're going in the right direction. But you can see how the darkness can help us get our bearings, but sometimes it's always dark. And we could be in a state of sadness, grief, depression. But I think just hunkering down and knowing that the sun will come out tomorrow.
And we realized in the first two iterations, we forgot that even in the dark, the Lord provides. Even in the dark, it's like you can have manna from heaven, which comes in the form of fish. So the Lord provides in all kinds of ways. The environment provides food and all kinds of things, and direction and bearings. And it's our kuleana to give back and to provide for creation, which is where Hokulea's lesson is now, is we are living on an island, whether it's a canoe or whether it's an island or it's this planet Earth. We need to give back to creation and sustain and steward it.
Talk about gifts from creation, though. That was a highlight, right? When we caught fish, huge highlight of the day. And since I was on a voyage back in 1980, we were having ancient Polynesian freeze-dried beef stroganoff and ancient Polynesian freeze-dried chicken a la king, cooked on an ancient Polynesian propane stove. And so we were, me especially, since I don't eat the four-legged animals, so excited when we got fish. So that is part of creation, that uhu right there in the middle of that. Awesome.
That's good. Fish. It's what's for dinner, as I say. The story that we find in our scriptures mirrors itself throughout most people groups around the world and through time. And what they all point to is that not only, as Nate said, there's a creator, but there's a rhythm and a gift in this creation. As a part of that, what does it mean for you all, in light of the story that we find in Genesis 1, that it is truthful, but not necessarily factual?
So many creation stories. The amount of creation stories in the world is, it's as many as religions, and there's tons of religions. And so the diversity of these stories is amazing. Just within our own Hawaiian tradition, there's like 5 creation stories. You've got Maui pulling up the islands. You've got, with his magic fishhook, which is in the sky as Manaya Kalani, we know it as Scorpio. You've got Papa and Wakea, the Earth Mother and Sky Father, and the children pushing them apart. And you've got the Kumulipo, which everybody calls the creation chant, when in fact it is a genealogy of a chief. And it ends with the announcement of the chief, but it starts in the void, in the po, in the darkness, and it moves through in a very evolutional way with the beginning of a single-cell animal, coral polyp, and then moves on and on and on till finally, and then there was you. And what was the question? Anyway, there's this diversity.
True.
But, so metaphor, it's story, it's the way that all peoples have tried to understand and explain that which is inexplicable.
Yeah.
I won't go into the Big Bang.
So, again, as you read Scripture, there are, things are said in many ways, and being a physician and a scientist, I think that sometimes we get caught up in fact. That fact is truth. Well, fact is not necessarily truth. Fact happens to be accepted at any one point in time, because in the course of my career, I think many times we've been told, this is fact, this is what you should do, and 10 years later, with more information, it's just the other way around. I hope it hasn't happened to anything seriously among you, but I've noticed that. So, to some extent, so what's truth? I think truth is everything is something of a parable. And wait, parable comes later as well. So were those true stories? Were those factual stories in the parables? No, but there is truth. And so it starts. It starts with a poem of creation whose words are not necessarily fact, but it's truth. And truth, of course, can be each of us can have a different truth, but there is truth, and we can't be too swayed by what people call fact, because they're different.
Yeah.
They are very different.
Alternative facts, fake news.
And so part of what I hope that through this month we can look at the way that our scriptures talk about creation and the way that they point over and over again to God. So next week we'll look at the sky, and then we'll go to mountain, and then we'll go to valley, and then lastly to see how these scriptures paint pictures for us to understand something that's true in a deeper and purer way. As a way to conclude our time, Marian can't ever get up with a microphone without a poem in hand. And so she wrote this poem 38 years ago, back when she was just a kid, on the canoe as she crossed over the equator to the southern hemisphere. And so I invite you to hear these words of a poet sharing her experience of this voyage on the Hokulea.
Written April 2nd, 1980, 19th day at sea. Hokulea crossing the equator. Over the watery middle of the world, across 21 degrees of sea, there was no Neptune with trident in hand. We crossed in morning hours, we. The ocean's the same on this southern side. It's clean and blue and deep and wide. The sky, too, is clear and clouds puff white. The difference shines in each starry night. Here the cross hangs higher, it seems, to point the way to all South Pacific dreams, swaying palms neath clear full moon skies, sensuous maidens in Pareo's exotic dark eyes. The dim North Star sparkle has dropped out of sight. The helmsman keeps the dipper astern as a guiding light with Alpha Beta lined up on our mast. Hokulea sails along about 5 knots fast. Nearing her first landfall, she moves steadfastly on. She's sailing the sea, unaware of dusk and dawn. Hawaii lies far behind in days and miles. We look forward to Tahiti and loved ones' smiles. But I do not hasten this journey's end, and I'm rather reluctant to bid aloha to my friend Hokulea and the dream I'm now living, to my shipmates, to all the taking and giving, to my first passage and experience of life at sea. All this and more cherished memories will be, to live on with me in the story I share, so more will know of Hokulea, more will know and will care.
Thank you. And so thank you for both sharing your experience and how you have discovered God in the midst of creation. You have inspired me all week long with your stories and perspectives. So thank you for sharing with all of us as we continue in worship. Let's have a seat so the next thing can go.